Hello everyone. Welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our previous episode, the battle in Cien seemed to take a turn with the arrival of Chloe and Veldora. In this episode, we will shift our perspective to the Heaven Tower, where the entire central world is preparing for war following Luminous Doomsday Declaration. Ivarage will make a small show of force, yet even this display will be enough to establish his overwhelming, despair-inducing power. This section of the novel introduced an extensive cast, as the author took the opportunity to bring back nearly every character who had ever appeared in TenSura's various nations. Given the sheer number of characters involved, we will provide a concise overview of the current situation. So, let's get started. Let's shift our focus to the border between Rubrios and the Barren Lands. It had been less than a full day since Luminous issued her Doomsday Declaration, yet across the world, powerful forces had already gathered at Rubrio's borders. Once hostile factions now stood united on the same battlefield, ready for the decisive battle that would determine the fate of humanity. The astonishing speed at which this formidable army had assembled was largely thanks to Velgryn's space-time connection, a skill that allowed for near-instantaneous deployment across vast distances. Let's quickly summarize the forces currently present. First, from the armed nation of Dworgen, King Gazel led his elite force of 500 Pegasus Knights, arriving precisely on schedule. Of course, Azura, who had been sent by Rimur to guard King Gazel, also accompanied him. The Eastern Empire, now reorganized, dispatched 100 Imperial Guardians under the command of Marshal Calgurio, with Minutes serving as his deputy. Meanwhile, the bitter war between Rubrios and the Giants had come to an end following Veldora's victory over the Degruel, Fen and Glassord. As a result, the two sides had reached a truce. From Rubrios, Hinata led the Holy Knight Order, bringing 300 elite crusaders to the battlefield. Pope Louis Valentine's Bloody Knights, with around 400 warriors, were all fearless special A-rank vampires, making them a force to be reckoned with. On the Giants' side, the newly appointed acting King Degura took command, with 4 Arms Becerra as his deputy commander, leading the chained giant army, an elite force of over 1,000 giant warriors, all of whom had long been prepared for battle. Additionally, several underground factions affiliated with the 3 drunken sages had also mobilized after undergoing rigorous training within the Tempest underground labyrinth. The most notable among them was the assassination organization, the Musketeers, led by Glenda. Furthermore, the Apostles of Vert had made their appearance, still under the command of Jaraid and Ein. As for the Monster Federation, the area was teeming with high-ranking demons. Among them was Primordial Purple Ultima, though she showed little interest in war councils and instead sat away from the main gathering, resting on a luxurious single-seater sofa. A steaming cup of red tea was placed on the table beside her, while her ever-loyal servant Zonda stood attentively by her side. Veyron also waited nearby, appearing relaxed, having only just recovered from exhaustion. Despite their fatigue from prior battles, neither Zonda nor Veyron dared to voice their complaints. After all, as previously mentioned, Ultima was notoriously the worst among the primordial demons in how she treated her subordinates. Complaints were simply not an option. This section was also occupied by Ultima's black numbers, specifically the purple lineage demons. Though worn out from previous battle engagements, the 200 archdemons under Ultima's command knew full well that there was no room for grievance here. Every single one of them focused solely on recovering their magical energy as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, a contingent of white lineage demons from Testarossa's black numbers had also arrived, led by Cien. Having traveled from Ingracia alongside Masayuki, Hinata, and the others, they now stood ready at the front lines, awaiting the imminent war. Black lineages Venom and Gadra were also present. Venom, now a close friend of Emperor Masayuki, had taken on the role of the Emperor's personal bodyguard during this Tenma Great War and accompanied him to the front lines. Gadra, alongside Adelman, stood as 2 ancient figures who had lived for over 1,000 years, yet both had regained their youthful appearances, making them almost unrecognizable to most of those around them. The two sat in a secluded corner away from the main group. Behind Edelman, Albert and Venti stood on standby, casually chatting amongst themselves. Despite the looming war that would decide the fate of the world, they remained relaxed and unaffected. Surrounding them was a group of individuals dressed in matching black uniforms, exuding a dangerous presence. These were Diablo's black lineage demons. Gadra, now a young black demon himself, had taken on the role of leading this formidable unit of 100 powerful black numbers. This alone was proof of Diablo's trust in him. Of course, we cannot forget Cien and her Yamigiri. During the battle against the Gruel, Cien had already demonstrated her immense combat prowess. Though she had not yet fully recovered from the previous battle, she appeared in good spirits, eager for the fight ahead. Her face bore an unwavering, confident smile, showing no signs of fear. Furthermore, with Dagura, one of her subordinates, now the new king of the giants, Cien's standing in the upcoming war had only risen further. Meanwhile, through Velgrind's space-time connection, the magic knights of Golden City El Dorado, trained by Leon, had also arrived on the battlefield. In the face of a global crisis, choosing to prioritize only their own nation's safety would ultimately lead to destruction for all. Thus, they did not hesitate, nor did they wait for Leon's orders. They took the initiative and headed straight for the front lines. Alongside them were the demons stationed in El Dorado. With Rain and Misery suddenly summoned by Guy, Mizora felt that if she didn't do something, she would surely face Rain's wrath. Thus, she and her forces voluntarily requested deployment, and Velgrynd brought them to the frontline battlefield. Among them were Mizora, leader of Primordial Blue Rain's blue lineage demons, Khan, leader of Primordial Green Misery's green lineage demons, and a contingent of Primordial Red Guy's red lineage demons, who had been under Rain and Misery's command. This group included Squall, Ulrich, Albin, and George, four of the highest-ranking generals of the red lineage demons. Though both Mizora and Khan were demon peers, their individual strength was not particularly outstanding compared to the many true powerhouses stationed at the front under True Dragon Velgrind's command. Thus, they obediently followed the overall strategic deployment. In a battle where the fate of the world hung in the balance, everyone had cast aside their pride and prejudice, ready to fight to the death against Ivarage and the cryptid army. Even Sari and Grigori, who had been on the run, had finally arrived. Though they still feared facing Hinata, their sense of duty to protect the world outweighed their personal burdens, compelling them to contribute what little strength they could. Among the various factions, there were also 500 heroes gathered from across the world. Most were renowned within their respective nations' guilds, each at least A rank in strength. Typically, such figures rarely had the opportunity to convene in one place. However, now that they had come together, the challenge lay in coordinating their efforts effectively. Emperor Masayuki was originally expected to take command, but while his ability to bring fortune was undeniable, he was ill-suited to managing a group of independent, self-reliant warriors. Without proper coordination, even an army of powerful individuals would fail to function as an effective force. At that moment, an unexpected leader began to emerge, Yomu, king of Farminas. Unlike Masayuki, Yomu lacked overwhelming strength, but he possessed a natural charisma that put others at ease. Through casual conversation, he gradually became the center of attention, and before long, the burden of overall command had unexpectedly fallen upon his shoulders. With all forces assembled, Luminous had no time to rest. She, along with Velgrynd and Hinata, engaged in an intense strategy meeting. Without a doubt, the Heaven Tower would serve as the focal point of the battle. Luminous proposed a strategy in which they would annihilate the cryptid army as they passed through the Heaven Tower, maximizing their advantage while minimizing their losses. However, this plan was immediately rejected by Velgrynd for a simple reason: the sheer size of the Heaven Tower made such a tactic impractical. With a diameter of 500 meters and a nearly symmetrical structure, there were no easily blockable choke points. The base of the tower was lined with hundreds of arch gates, each large enough to allow giants to pass through with ease. The interior stairways were also massive, unsuitable for a defensive battle in a confined space. Given their current force of 3,000 elite warriors, it was simply impossible to contain the entire cryptid army within the tower. However, the strategy itself was in the right direction. If they wanted to concentrate their power, they needed to use a barrier to completely enclose the Heaven Tower's surroundings, preventing the enemy from pouring in through its countless openings. Thus, the final plan was established. A massive cubic holy field would be constructed to seal off the lower section of the Heaven Tower. Since the upper section had no windows and was sturdy enough to withstand Milim's Drago Nova, only the bottom needed to be completely sealed. The challenge, however, lay in generating enough holy energy to suppress the cryptid army and overturn their numerical disadvantage. This required the full cooperation and combined effort of all present forces. After thorough discussion, it was decided that the 3,000-strong coalition army would be divided into 4 units positioned around the Heaven Tower: east, west, south, and north. Each direction would be assigned a team of holy spellcasters responsible for coordinating the activation of the holy field. Ground forces would form a defensive perimeter, and if necessary, aerial units, including mounted knights and magic-based flight squads, would assist in preventing the barrier from being instantly destroyed. The eastern front was entrusted to Arnaud and Nicholas as the main spellcasters, with Hinata and her Holy Knight Order stationed alongside Masayuki and the Imperial Guardians of the Eastern Empire. This front was further reinforced by Cien and 200 white lineage demons, as well as the independently acting Venom. The western front had Fritz and Seri handling the spellcasting, while Dagura and Basara led their 1,000-strong chain giant army. Supporting them were Xian and her 100 Yamagiri warriors, Glenda and her musketeers, Grigori, and the Apostles of Vert. As this battlefront bordered the Desert of Death, it had been assigned the highest concentration of forces. The southern front was managed by Lytus and Muran for spellcasting, while Yomu commanded 500 heroes gathered from around the world, as well as Leon's magic knights. Additional reinforcements came from Ultima and her 200 purple lineage demons, along with Khan, Mizora, and their forces. Mizora even went a step further, summoning additional 60 red lineage demons for support. Each of these was a named archdemon, ensuring a formidable force. The northern front was relatively narrow, with Bacchus and Leonard managing the spellcasting, while Pope Louis Valentine's 400 bloody knights and vampire nobles took charge of defense. Gadra and Adelman, as well as Diablo's elite force of 100 black lineage demons, were also stationed here. Meanwhile, King Gazel and the Pegasus Knights formed the reserve force, prepared to reinforce any struggling battlefront. As the most powerful being present, Velgrynd deployed her parallel existences across all 4 battlefronts to ensure immediate response upon Ivarage's arrival. Finally, Luminous, overseeing the battlefield from above, took command of strengthening and maintaining the holy purification barrier. With all preparations complete, the warriors braced themselves for battle. Yet, the moment of confrontation arrived far sooner than expected, bringing with it an overwhelming, terrifying despair, one that seemed to mock all their meticulous preparations. A playful voice, one that sounded childlike and mischievous, echoed in the minds of all the warriors, inviting them to join in a game. But this was not the voice of an ordinary being. It carried with it an unfathomable essence that crushed all battle spirit in an instant. The moment they heard it, any will to fight was drained from their souls. The first to suffer misfortune were the warriors of the Eastern Front. A childlike figure, completely out of place on the battlefield, appeared within the barrier. It was a girl, her face eerily smooth and featureless, devoid of any contours or expression. She had simply appeared, defying all logic. She was Ivarage. The instant Hinata laid eyes on Ivarage, her ultimate skill, Lord of Odds, triggered a vision of the future, a vision filled with utter despair. In it, most of the warriors were reduced to nothing but dust, while the few survivors lay on the brink of death, powerless and unable to even stand. It was a future that spelled near total annihilation. Even though she didn't know how much her warning would reduce the damage, it was her final cry, made with the hope of saving even one more survivor, urging everyone to take cover. 600 warriors instantly obeyed her command. But it was already too late. Ivarage unleashed a merciless flash of light, moving at near light speed, surpassing human comprehension. A mysterious beam, impossible to analyze, filled the battlefield. At the very instant Hinata issued her warning, Velgrind's parallel existence, which had been stationed near Masayuki, immediately merged with her main body and deployed a full-force protective barrier to shield Masayuki and the others. However, reality was far from kind. Ivarage's power was so overwhelming that even Velgrind's strongest defensive barrier failed to completely neutralize the attack. The mere aftermath alone was enough to cause massive casualties on the Eastern Front. Against divine power, mere mortals stood no chance. In an instant, the defensive line collapsed, and the eastern sector turned into a living hell. But in that critical moment, a third figure took action. Hovering above the battlefield, Luminous activated an enhanced version of Sanctuary Resurrection, utilizing the minds of her devoted followers as a conduit to amplify the spell's reach. Thanks to the sanctified domain's expanded magical effects, the fallen warriors were resurrected. Of course, those whose bodies had been completely obliterated could not be restored immediately. But because Velgrynd had managed to absorb the brunt of the attack, the ultimate catastrophe was narrowly avoided. However, the price was steep. Nicholas, who had been responsible for maintaining the holy field barrier, perished on the spot, causing the protective formation to collapse instantly. Yet, Hinata acted without hesitation, swiftly re-establishing the barrier. In the brief interval during which it was down, Nicholas was revived, and without a moment's pause, without even registering the pain of death, he took back his position, refusing to let himself appear weak in front of the woman he admired. But not everyone was Nicholas. While Luminous had successfully prevented any permanent casualties, it did not mean the battle could simply continue as if nothing had happened. Most of the soldiers were paralyzed, unable to recover from the sheer terror. Many had undergone rigorous training in the labyrinth, experiencing death and resurrection countless times, or had even been revived before by Demon Lord Rimuru. Yet, facing evil god Ivarage, an entity beyond comprehension, their spirits were utterly shattered. It was not just the destruction that terrified them, it was Ivarage's appearance. She was merely a child, an infant-like being. This realization was more horrifying than any raw display of power because it meant she had room to grow. The thought sent waves of despair rippling through the ranks. What was the point of resistance if their strongest defenses meant nothing? Meanwhile, the cryptid army broke through the holy field, engaging King Gazel and his Pegasus Knights in fierce combat. They were meant to serve as an emergency response unit, yet from the very first moment, they were already caught in an attritional battle. The war had barely begun, yet despair was already consuming everything. But humanity refused to surrender. Standing as a divine figure among mortals, Luminous issued a decree to all present, promising that even if they fell in battle, she would resurrect them. Hinata, standing at the front line, roused the warriors' spirits, declaring that if death was inevitable, she would rather die fighting with pride than cower in despair. Calgurio, raising his fist, rallied the Imperial Guardians, reminding them that they had always fought under the protection of their goddess Velgrynd, and that now was the time to repay that divine grace with unwavering valor. It no longer mattered that the enemy embodied despair itself. Even if they were annihilated, they would not retreat. Seeing the morale shift, Cien chuckled, remarking that if Testarossa-sama were here to witness this pathetic display, they would all be better off dying at Ivarage's hands rather than facing her wrath. He barely finished his sentence before the white lineage demons of the black numbers stood up, their eyes gleaming with killing intent. Without hesitation, they surged toward the cryptids, ready to unleash carnage. Thus, amidst the endless waves of despair, the true battle had finally begun. Alright, that's all for this video. In essence, the entire content of this episode can be summarized in one sentence: Velgrynd and Luminous, leading 3,000 of Central World's strongest warriors, devised a defensive strategy, only for Ivarage to effortlessly shatter it with a casual attack. Humanity was plunged into absolute despair. After all the careful planning, up until now, everything had been completely useless. However, as I mentioned, This episode feels more like a recap, reintroducing many characters from previous arcs and reminding us of their presence in the narrative. Moving forward, the battlefield will be covered in separate segments, each focusing on different fronts. In our next episode, we will further explore the ongoing war. Additionally, Benimaru and Jahil also will make their move to the battlefield. The next episode will be just as thrilling. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.